Hey,
Hey,
perfect. There you are. Can you
hey.
hear us, Adam?
I can, yeah. Hi, Tony. Hi, Tegan.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Yep.
Excellent,
Excellent.
excellent. So, yeah, for all the people tuning in, if you don't know Adam, he is from Grocycle. Grocycle has a mission to teach or to demystify the process of mushroom growing. They have an awesome online course for teaching people how to do growing mushrooms at home and how to do low-tech mushroom farming. And they've actually set up low-tech mushroom farms all over the place, and we're definitely going to get into that. So, welcome to FreshCap Friday, Adam. We're so happy to have you here.
Thanks a lot for having me for a start. And yeah, it's excellent. I love what you guys have been doing. We've followed your website for quite a long time. And I often refer people actually to a lot of the articles on your site because they're really, really good. And yeah, often people are asking questions which you've covered in a lot of detail. So thanks for having me on.
Great. No, it's great to be here. It's great to have you here. So I just want to know, first of all, mushroom growing is kind of a niche topic. What was it that got you and Eric, I guess, into growing mushrooms in the first place?
Yeah, it was basically a hobby. I was studying ecology at university and became really interested in all sorts of food production. You know, how we produce our food has a massive impact on the environment. And one crop that just sort of caught my eye was mushrooms. And I just kind of wondered how they were grown to begin with. Saw them in the shops and then started to dig in and learn a bit more about it and was just fascinated by it, you know, straight away. It's just such an unusual life form. I just kind of got hooked on it and began to grow them for fun originally, just learning little bits off the internet. And I bought Paul Stamets' famous Growing Gourmet Medicinal Mushrooms, which has just been a Bible for me ever since.
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful book, and it's a great starting place for people who want to grow mushrooms. And obviously, so you got interested in mushrooms, you started growing them yourselves. But what I've seen from what GrowCycle's done, and I followed you guys for quite a while as well, because I just think what you guys are doing is so cool, is really focused on teaching other people how to grow mushrooms in a low-tech way. So, you know, the mantra is kind of, you know, growing mushrooms doesn't have to be that complicated. I mean, sure, on a commercial scale, you need sterilization, you need processes and all this other stuff. But, you know, if you just want to grow some mushrooms in a tent in your garage or whatever, it doesn't have to be so complicated. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, how you got into teaching others how to grow mushrooms and a little bit about some of the low-tech mushroom farms that you guys have helped set up all over the place.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's evolved over the years, really, because originally I did grow mushrooms in the traditional way, sterilizing all the substrate. I had a series of 5 huge, you know, all-American pressure cookers, and I used to
Right.
sterilize everything. For a good couple of years, I just grew entirely like that and supplied mushrooms in my local area. And then I think it all began to change when I started growing mushrooms on coffee grounds. I just loved the simplicity of it. You had this substrate that was already, you know, fairly clean if you pick it up when it's fresh, and it just struck me how much simpler it was to use substrate that's already either partly pasteurized or very fresh and clean. And that was, I guess, the beginning of this journey into finding low-tech, simpler ways to grow. And naturally, you know, when you're doing something a bit unusual like that, people start asking you, how do you do that? And so in the first instance, we just started running courses in our local area here. But we found that people started coming from further and further afield. So we had people visit from Hungary and Italy, and we're based in the UK here, so it seemed kind of crazy that people were needing to travel so far to learn. So that's when we kind of ventured more into online courses and teaching over the internet instead.
Very cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, so what do you think? I mean, since you guys have started, I'm sure there's a lot more people that have started to set up these small scale mushroom farms all over the place. And one of the best things about mushrooms in particular is they're great for, you know, local areas. A lot of the oyster mushrooms in particular, which is what you guys focus on a lot, they don't travel very well. So, you know, you're going to want to get mushrooms in your local area. But have you seen kind of like a surge of these small farms popping up everywhere? And what do you think the implications are of a bunch of, you know, little micro farms and people growing mushrooms in their homes or in small businesses?
Yeah, sure. I think it's fantastic. I mean, like you, I've probably seen this sort of grow over the last 5 years or so in particular.
Oh, yeah.
Sort of little small scale mushroom farms popping up all over the place. And as you alluded to, you kind of have a benefit as a small local producer because you can produce the mushrooms and supply them locally, and they're just super fresh compared to anything that's been imported from further afield. Because mushrooms have such a short shelf life, especially mushrooms like oyster mushrooms, which we tend to grow a lot of. That if you buy something that's been grown 4 or 5 days away and it's traveled, and by the time it gets to the person who eats it, it's really not in good condition. So I think that's maybe partly what's behind it, is there's an opportunity there for people who can supply and harvest and take it somewhere within a few hours. There's a little opening, I think, and that's partly behind it, alongside the fact that just more people are interested in food and good quality food.
Yes.
No, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. I mean, I think people are starting to pay a lot more attention about what they're eating, what they're putting in their body, and fresh local food is one of those things that seems to be growing everywhere. And the cool thing about it is it's something that anybody can pretty much do. I mean, like you were saying earlier, it doesn't have to be complicated. You don't need massive mechanization or a massive farm to be able to grow a bunch of really good mushrooms that people are really going to enjoy. So if you're just joining us on Instagram, again, our guest today is Adam Sayner. Am I saying that right? Sayner?
Yeah, that's it. That's the one.
Okay. Adam Sayner from Grocycle. Grocycle is demystifying mushroom growing, and a lot of the stuff they're doing is really, really great. So if you want to learn how to grow mushrooms at home or on a low-tech way, you should definitely check out Grocycle.com, which is where they're at. But I just wanted to keep talking about this idea of mushroom farming doesn't have to be complicated. So what are some of the biggest barriers to entry, do you think, of people growing mushrooms at home? A lot of people garden at home. There's no worries for growing herbs or growing stuff in the garden, but a lot of people think that, whoa, I can't grow mushrooms. So what do you think are some of the biggest barriers, and what are you guys doing to try and knock that down?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something we encounter quite a lot. We often hear from people who have been researching growing mushrooms, and they start looking around the internet, maybe read some books, and they just get overwhelmed with all the information. The traditional way of growing mushrooms is quite technical. If you're not familiar with it already, if you don't have a degree in biology, for example, or you haven't spent much time learning about it already, you can be overwhelmed when you first start reading, about sterile technique and sterilizing substrate. You also need some equipment for that. You need to create a lab type environment of some sort. And you need to learn sterile technique and keeping things clean. So for a lot of people, I think they just sort of take a first look and just get, frightened off from it. And like you said, it doesn't have to be grown in that way. There are ways to grow, particularly, very aggressive mushrooms like oyster mushrooms that will just colonize really fast a load of different types of substrate. You can grow them really successfully in pretty easy ways that in essence is not that much different to growing other crops. It's this sense of sort of planting a seed in the right environment and it will prosper. And so that's what I get really excited about, is just finding these kind of easier ways to grow, and then passing that on to people who want to grow mushrooms but want to do it in the easiest way possible.
Right. And I think you make a really good point in your course, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but the idea of starting from spawn. So, making your own spawn or starting from a pure culture, that can get a little complicated. And if people start there, there's a really good chance, that they're going to maybe give up because it's not going to work right away. But if you start from being able to purchase spawn or even being able to purchase a kit, starting from there, the whole process becomes a lot easier. And I found, for myself, when I first started growing mushrooms way back when, I tried to do everything really simple because I thought, that's the way it would go. And, nothing worked, because even though I was doing things in a simple manner, I still wasn't doing it right. I needed to learn the right ways. And then I got, things to be more and more and more complicated, till I got to a point where I was doing everything that was really complicated. And it was working. But now I'm starting to do things for growing at home anyways, where I'm backing that off and trying to see how simple can I possibly make it. And it seems like there's that kind of an arc of learning. I mean, there's a lot of information out there, but there is, if you're doing it right, it doesn't have to be complicated.
And I've a very similar journey for me of sort of going right into the complicated way and then sort of stepping back and saying, what's really needed here? How else could the same outcome, beautiful crops of mushrooms, be had without all of that effort? Not to knock that other approach, by the way, as well, because there's a lot of merit in that. If you want to grow other varieties, or if you want to do it on a huge scale and make sure that everything is really well done, that has its place. But my feeling is that only really suits kind of a small group of people that want to go about it like that. And there's a much bigger group of people that would just like to, grow on a smaller scale of, say, I don't know, 10, 20 kilograms, which, what's that, kind of up to 50 pounds or so. That's a decent amount for somebody to grow in a small space that they've got without it becoming a massive thing. And I think that can suit a lot more people.
But if you got down to the simplest method of growing mushrooms, that would be growing mushrooms from a kit, and that is something you guys do, right?
Yeah, that's what we've been. That was the kind of the biggest part of our business, and still is a big part. Has been for maybe 5-6 years or so. And that again kind of grew out of people just asking us. I remember we used to go to the markets and would take mushrooms to sell there, and I used to sort of always have a bag on the side so people could see how they're grown. And then people were starting to ask, can I buy that bag off of you? And, just sell that for not very much money. But then, of course, realized that if you turn it into a proper product and box it as a kit, then it's a whole other thing. And I think it's probably similar in the US as it is in the UK. At Christmas, people just go crazy for finding interesting gifts. So we find that kind of 75% of our mushroom kit sales happen at Christmas, when people are just really struggling to find interesting things for people, and they see something like a mushroom kit and they're just blown away and think it's amazing to give a living thing like that to people. So yeah, we found that mushroom kits have been a great thing as a business, but also just love seeing people grow their mushrooms at home like that. We often get lots of children having their mushroom kits, and that's just wonderful to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
most
so satisfying. They grow so quickly, right? Once they start growing.
Yeah, most people, they've got no idea how quickly they grow or how they grow. So to bring that into someone's home and put it on the windowsill, it's just really exciting for people.
Yeah, it's a great learning experience for kids too, to get involved in that process.
Yeah, exactly. We've done some things like that with schools, where we've taken kits into schools and given them a bit of information to teach the kids. And yeah, they love it. The teachers and the children love it.
Yeah, no, it's a great thing to get into. Actually, I shared a photo on Instagram this week that I found on Reddit, and it was a bunch of those mushroom kits similar to yours. I think they were the Back to the Roots kits, and they were at a Home Depot or something, and they were all on the shelf, and they were all fruiting out of the boxes, which I thought was really funny. Do you ever find challenges like that, like trying to make sure the kits don't fruit when they're before they're supposed to, or that they do fruit when they are supposed to? What are the challenges with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you probably know this yourself from growing them. Oyster mushrooms don't stop. They've got a thirst for life and they just want to grow. And so we actually stopped selling via shops because of that exact problem. We had the same thing where you'd send a load of kits to a shop, and then you'd get a picture a month or so later from people that you'd sold them to, and the mushrooms are just growing out of the boxes, and people are a bit freaked out by it because it looks a bit like alien life force or something. And so we stopped that completely. And what we do is we put them in the fridge. So we've got a big shipping container fridge where we can hold a load of stock. And if you keep them cool like that, then they basically stay dormant for quite a lot longer. And so we do that and then just ship them out directly ourselves.
Do you find certain strains work better than others for the kits?
Yeah, it's exactly. So we sort of tested, I think, 10 oyster mushroom strains quite a few years back. Not all of them kept so well, even if it was cold. So we sort of selected one or two that tended to keep really well, and those are what we use for our kits.
Excellent.
Very cool. Very cool. No, that's great. And yeah, that is by far the easiest way for people to get into growing mushrooms, is just grab a kit and, they can see what the process is like. And I know a lot of people who start with growing mushrooms from a kit, they'll get hooked and they'll say, man, I got to learn more about this. I got to go down the rabbit hole. And, if they do want to go down the rabbit hole, there's so much information out there, which is what's really cool about your course, is because it really breaks it down into, I don't want to say simple steps, but really actionable steps and, really bite-sized pieces that people can go and learn how to do this. So I want you to talk a little bit about your course, where people can find out about it, and, a little bit more information on that.
Sure, yeah. So our course is, like you said, it's like a step-by-step breakdown of how to go from, maybe not knowing anything at all into having a small-scale mushroom farm up and running that you kind of build and run for yourself. So we kind of break it down into modules and then into steps, lessons. And we try to keep the lessons kind of short, 10, 15 minutes, so that it's kind of easy to just sit down and delve into. And there's a load of resources that go alongside that, kind of downloadable files, that kind of thing. And yeah, what we've found is that people just are able to get it in that way. You know, they can just sort of, when it's broken down step by step, it's not this huge, big bunch of information that you're trying to navigate your way through. You can just sort of do this bit and then move on to that bit. And the other bit that's quite a big part of the course is there's a Facebook support group as well for course members. So you've also got this community aspect where people can share what they're doing with other people. And basically everyone's learning from each other, and everyone approaches it in a slightly different way, which is really exciting to see. We often learn stuff from other people in the group, and it's kind of an evolving thing, which is an aspect of it that I and I think a lot of course members really enjoy. Mm-hmm. But the thing about making it really simple for people is in some ways we've taken a step back with the course. The first set of lessons we made were how to set up a mushroom farm. And then we found some people were joining the course and they weren't quite ready to set up a mushroom farm. They wanted like a smaller scale thing at home. So we created kind of an extra course, which people also get. And that's kind of the first step of like just how to grow mushrooms at home, you know, maybe a kilo of mushrooms a week, that kind of thing. So a lot of people we're finding now that join the course do that first for a few months and just get a feel for it while they start planning kind of the bigger picture of how they might want to grow 10, 20, 30 kilos a week. And find some outlets to sell them, kind of, you know, as a sideline income.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, gradually ramp up to a bigger scale.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's not so daunting. You've got a feel for all the steps involved, and just, you know, you get a feeling for what the mushrooms need in order to thrive as well.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then you can find someone to purchase them, and as
Exactly.
you go bigger, you can get more people involved. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you find that, you know, people just start asking you. It probably happened for you guys when you were growing, I imagine. You just start growing a little bit, and then friends ask you, and somebody works at a restaurant, and then they're saying, can I have some? And before you know it, you've just got a lot of people asking you for mushrooms, and you've got a reason to grow more and kind of expand it a little bit.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
Yeah. It can get out of control pretty quickly. I know once you get into it, it kind of takes over your mind, and you want to do nothing but grow mushrooms. So it looks like
we do have a question here from Freak G. He says, is the Grow at Home course part of the big course, or can we get it separate as well?
Good question. Yeah, at the moment it is just part of the big course, although in the next couple of months we're going to separate it out and have that as a separate course as well. So yeah, that's how it is at the moment, but in the near future it will be a separate course.
Excellent. All right.
I think a good point on that too is that, and I've checked out all the courses. I think it's really cool. But you know, even in the big course for low-tech mushroom farming, there's a lot of stuff that you can take from that and implement on a much smaller scale for growing at home. You know, it's one of those things where everybody's situation is going to be a little bit different. You know, whether or not you just have an apartment and you're growing them in a small 4-tier greenhouse, or you know, you have a big piece of land and you can do it in a shed, or you can do it outside. So if you learn. The more you learn, you might not have to do it that exact specific way, but you can always kind of apply it to a smaller scale or to a bigger scale. It really does kind of work both ways.
Exactly, yeah. And we tried to build the course with that in mind. So we show a few different examples of different ways you can build a fruiting room, for example. You know, one is in a like a walk-in fridge, kind of a bigger unit, or in a hydroponics tent, or in a 4-tier greenhouse. And so we try to teach the principles that each space needs and different ways of creating them, and show different examples, but knowing that everyone is going to apply it in a different way. And like you said, there are some people that are just living in a flat or an apartment in the middle of a city, and they just take those principles and design their own little setup. And then other people have got kind of a huge warehouse, and they're looking at it and thinking, well, how can I do this on a much bigger scale? And they just sort of, some people are really good at just kind of building the setup themselves. Other people get a friend to help them. Whatever. The point is, if you've got the information there, you can kind of work out how to go about it yourself instead of it being a one-size-fits-all scenario.
Exactly. And I think the best advice is always to just start a little bit, because no matter how much planning you do, you're going to run into things that you didn't really think about, or situations that you thought you understood, but maybe you're not quite sure about. So just starting, and starting on a small scale and getting a feel for the process, getting a feel for how mushrooms grow, what mushrooms need, what species work good in your area, what mushrooms actually taste good and people enjoy and are going to want to buy from you, etc. So, a lot of important things, but I think the best advice is to just get started and work your way through it.
I absolutely agree with that. And that kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier about the easiest way to start is either with a kit, or if you want to go a step on from that, would be just to source some spawn from somewhere. So instead of trying to create the spawn yourself, which is a bit more complicated as a beginner, it's much better just to buy some spawn from somewhere that is already a pure culture, and just do the final stage of the process of adding that to substrate and growing that on. You're far more likely to have success with that than if you start right at the beginning with petri dishes or agar plates or grain. That's a bit more complicated as a beginner. So,
well, and even a lot of commercial farms, from small scale to even medium-sized farms, will never go to the step of making their own spawn. They like to say that they're just focusing on growing the mushrooms, fruiting the mushrooms. I know we met a shiitake mushroom farm in Washington that did that same thing, and they grew thousands of pounds of shiitake. And they had experimented a little bit with doing their own spawn and their own cultures and stuff. And they said, you know what, that's just something I don't have to worry about. I'll leave that to someone else. And they buy the pure spawn and grow the mushrooms. So there's, a lot of different ways to successfully kind of build up a mushroom farm in that way.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. That's definitely the norm in Europe as well. Most of the big mushroom farms do exactly that. They just buy the spawn in and, there's a lot of benefit from just focusing on one part of the process, I think. It keeps it a lot simpler, and you can do that bit really well.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I think that's really great. And I think the resources you guys are providing to teach other people how to grow mushrooms is wonderful. A lot of people like that kind of step-by-step process, and especially the community aspect, like you mentioned with the Facebook group, to be able to learn from others. So I think that's wonderful. So your website is grocycle.com. And if you go there, you can get, it looks like you can get a free guide for learning how to grow oyster mushrooms.
Yeah, so we have a free ebook, which is the ebook is called "How to Set Up a Low-Tech Mushroom Farm," and it's a fairly long. It's like 10 pages or so, and it just walks you through the different aspects of low-tech mushroom farming. What do we mean by low-tech mushroom farming? What kind of spaces do you need to create? What kind of substrate might you use? And some ideas for where you could sell mushrooms if you decide you want to sell them, as opposed to just growing them for yourself. So that ebook you can get at Grocycle.com. On the homepage there, you can just download that and have a read.
Excellent. And one more thing, if people wanted to learn more about your course, where's the best way that they can reach you?
So the best place actually, once you download that ebook, there's a series of emails that we'll send, and a few videos actually as well, just to explain a bit more about low-tech mushroom farming. And we send some information about the course via email like that. So if people are interested, if they download that ebook, then we'll send them some more information by email, and they can find out about the course and ask any questions that they might have by email.
That's so great. Cool. Well, yeah, I'm going to send out an email about this as well. I think it's just such a cool course. And like I said, I checked it out myself, and there's a lot of really, really great information in there, a lot of great downloadable material. And overall, it's a great way for people, for beginners or even people who know a little bit to get into low-tech mushroom farming. So I want to thank you so much for joining us on FreshCap Friday Live, Adam. Again, if you want to reach out to Adam, the best bet is to go to Grocycle.com, check out all the wonderful information they have there. And if you have any more questions, don't hesitate to even reach out to me, and I can pass them on, or just head over to your website.
Amazing. Thanks so much, guys, for having me on. And yeah, wishing you all the best. We'll keep in touch.
You too.
You as well, Adam.
Have a great weekend.
Cheers. Bye.
Take care.